सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। May we be protected together. May we be nourished together. May we work together with vigor. May our study make us illumined. May there be no dislike between us. Om peace, peace, peace. Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. Salutations to Swami Vivekananda, the king of monks, and who is of the nature of existence, consciousness, bliss, and removes the torments of the world. Om peace, peace, peace. Hearty welcome to all of you friends on this very beautiful evening, and special welcome to our guest speakers and the guest musicians. As you all know, we have been observing this day for quite a few years. The second Sunday of every September, marking the beginning of the end of summer vacation and beginning of the fall session. It has a lot of significance because it also marks the beginning of the Vedanta Society of Providence. It was established in 1928, again on the second Sunday of September, which fell on 9th of September then. Also, it has a further more universal significance, and there the name that Universal Brotherhood Day is derived from, and that is again on September 11th, 1893, Swami Vivekananda gave his first speech at the Parliament of Religions held in Chicago in 1893, and he exhorted the followers of different religions to have this sense of harmony and brotherhood. And so that is also a commemoration of this event, which assumes more importance this year because we are observing for last about 2 years the 150th birth anniversary of Swami Vivekananda, which actually started here in Providence at the Brown University. It was 9/11/11, and Janet took special interest in that to have an interfaith meeting with very nice these contributions for members of different religions, and it was a very beautifully organized program. Since then we have been having various programs in connections with the 150th birth anniversary. A few more will be following, and this is in this relation. Every year we take up actually a topic for this Universal Brotherhood Day meeting, which is always an interfaith meeting, and the topic chosen is always something that is relevant to all religions. This year we have chosen the topic of Swami Vivekananda, the teacher of religion without borders. So we have illustrious speakers, very scholarly, and have great connections, much deeper understanding of all different religions. We will see. I will introduce them at proper time. But now we will start with the readings from Swami Vivekananda. I request Asha Vyas, a student at UConn, to read a few portions from Swami Vivekananda's teachings collected from his the complete works of Swami Vivekananda.
Hello everyone. So I'll just get right into it. We believe not only in universal toleration, but we accept all religions as true. I am proud to belong to a nation which has sheltered the persecuted and the refugees of all religions and all nations of the earth. The present convention, which is one of the most august assemblies ever held, is in itself a vindication, a declaration to the world of the wonderful doctrine preached in the Gita. Quote, "Whosoever comes to me, through whatsoever form, I reach him. All men are struggling through paths which in the end lead to me." End quote. Sectarianism, bigotry, and its horrible descendant, fanaticism, have long possessed this beautiful earth. They have filled the earth with violence, drenched it often and often with human blood, destroyed civilization, and sent whole nations to despair. Had it not been for those horrible demons, human society would be far more advanced than it is now. But their time has come, and I fervently hope that the bell that tolled this morning in the honor of this convention may be the death knell of all fanaticism, of all persecutions with the sword or with the pen, and of all uncharitable feelings between persons wending their way to the same goal. Much has been said of the common ground of religious unity. I am not going just now to venture my own theory, but if anyone here hopes that this unity will come by the triumph of any one of the religions and the destruction of the others, to him I say, brother, yours is an impossible hope. Do I wish that the Christian would become a Hindu? God forbid. Do I wish that the Hindu or the Buddhist would become a Christian? God forbid. If the Parliament of Religions has shown anything to the world, it is this. It has proved to the world that holiness, purity, and charity are not the exclusive possessions of any church in the world, and that every system has produced men and women of the most exalted character. In the face of this evidence, if anybody dreams of the exclusive survival of his own religion and the destruction of others, I pity him from the bottom of my heart, and point out to him that upon the banner of every religion will soon be written, in spite of resistance, help and not fight, assimilation, not destruction, harmony and peace, and not dissension. This then is a fact in the present history of the human race, that all these great religions exist and are spreading and multiplying. Now, there is a meaning, certainly, to this, and had it been the will of an all-wise and all-merciful Creator that one of these religions should exist and the rest should die, it would have become a fact long ago. If it were a fact that only one of these religions is true and the rest are false, by this time it would have covered the whole ground. But this is not so. Not one has gained all the ground. All religions sometimes advance, sometimes decline. You see that happening all the time. You cannot make all conform to the same ideas. That is a fact, and I thank God that it is so. I am not against any sect. I am glad that sects exist, and I only wish that they may go on multiplying more and more. Why? Simply because of this. If you and I and all who are present here were to think exactly the same thoughts, there would be no thoughts for us to think. We know that two or more forces must come into collision in order to produce motion. It is the clash of thought, the differentiation of thought that awakes thought. Now, if we all thought alike, we would be like Egyptian mummies in a museum looking vacantly at each other's faces. No more than that. My idea, therefore, is that all these religions are different forces in the economy of God, working for the good of mankind, and that not one can become dead, not one can be killed. Just as you cannot kill any force in nature, so you cannot kill any of these spiritual forces. You have seen that each religion is living. From time to time, it may retrograde or go forward. At one time, it may be shorn of a good many of its trappings. At another time, it may become covered with all sorts of trappings. But all the same, the soul is ever there. It can never be lost. The ideal which every religion represents is never lost, and so every religion is intelligently on the march. And that universal religion about which philosophers and others have dreamed in every country already exists. It is here. As the universal brotherhood of man is already existing, so is universal religion. Which of you that have traveled far and wide have not found brothers and sisters in every nation? I have found them all over the world. Brotherhood already exists. Only there are numbers of persons who fail to see this and only upset it by crying for new brotherhoods. Universal religion, too, is already existing. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashay. Every year we sing an opening song on this occasion, the same song titled The Mission, which describes Swami Vivekananda's taking up this mission. The song is written by Eric Jones, and the music has been composed by John Schlenk, who is amongst us today. This is the special beauty of this year, that this wonderful composer has agreed to come on this occasion to present this song and some other of his compositions. So I request him and all the singers to join in presenting this song, this mission.
Mother, shall I
John and all the singers. Now we get ahead with the symposium on Swami Vivekananda, the teacher of religion without borders. And the first would be Reverend Janet Cooper Nelson. She has been at the helm of the office of the chaplain and religious life at Brown for 23 years now. Had a really brilliant academic career full of lots of honors and awards. She is ordained by the United Church of Christ, and in addition to handling efficiently all her responsibilities at Brown, which are enormous, let me tell you, I have seen that. She does extensive preaching and is associated with many religious forums and interfaith activities. Personally, I found her ability to touch the divine core in every person very admirable. Her orations are always full of rich substance and to the point. I feel fortunate to be associated, in a very humble way of course, with her work at Brown. As always before, this time too she has taken out time from her extensively busy schedule and consented to come and speak here. Many thanks, dear Janet. She will speak on Vivekananda, the wisdom in his own time and in ours. Reverend Janet Cooper Nelson.
It's truly an honor for me to be here and to claim Swami Yogatmananda as a colleague in the work we share at Brown. I thought as I walked in today, having been in this space before, how just truly beautiful it is. The light streaming through the windows, the gathering of so many people of goodwill. It really is a very special sanctuary seated just here next to the campus. And I know from many who come here, students who find in Swami Yogatmananda an incredible conversation partner and teacher, source of counsel, what extraordinary hospitality the whole of Vedanta Society extends to the Brown community. So I wouldn't do well at all to begin without just saying thank you. Always here, there's a cup of tea. Always here, there's a welcome even when you come unexpected. And sometimes when I come, I have quite wild-eyed ideas. And Swami never looks at me like, Janet, take that home. He always kindly makes the tea and we talk and we get to a better place. So the efficiency that he's kind to say I bring to my work is absolutely founded on the good wisdom and strength of the many, many religious communities that gather at Brown and our privilege to be together. The 23 years have gone by quickly. So I must begin with a word of humility. For me to stand here in the Vedanta Society and say anything very expert about Swami Vivekananda seems to me hubris in the extreme. In this place resides great wisdom about this great teacher. And I wish rather to talk a bit about those who listened to him, those who heard what he said in his time, and then some of what follows. There are many measures of a life. I'm actually convinced that when anniversaries come, it's very important to think about the actual legacy. What is it that lives still? While our bodies may die, the spirit and the enabling capacity that I believe comes from God is sustained long after our life. In the Christian world, not so much on the Protestant side of the line, but I'm very glad to be here with Father John because he can confirm this. We have folks we call saints. And these are folks who know the particular trials of life and who in their lives developed a special strength. We often refer to them as those who are blessed by God, and I love that word especially in the Greek because the word is makarios, and it means beautiful. So the beauty or the blessing of being a saint in a lifetime can actually be quite like the words of the hymn we just sang, where in fact there's great struggle, there's great loneliness, there can be great pain and uncertainty in that sacred life in its own days. I was quite struck this time reading a bit about Swami Vivekananda to discover how brief his life was. I often wonder about that in our spiritual teachers. It seems frequently they don't stay long, and they leave us with many questions. I actually imagine us all arriving at some holy banquet where we can all sit together in eternity. And I don't know about you, but I have a long list of questions I wish to ask at that time. And I hope it's possible during the meal to get up and change seats, because there are several with whom I'd like to speak. Their teachings have left me with questions, big ones. And I expect that the very reason they taught what they did was to raise those questions. So I go back to that day at the Parliament of the World Religions, where this very young and inspired teacher speaks sisters and brothers of America. In my tradition, we refer to those who are members together of the church as sisters and brothers. I find myself hoping that as he stood, he felt that sense of family from America, because it's a very long way that he came to teach, and he was a very young man. I find myself thinking about our students as they arrive at Brown, knowing that entrusted to them are spiritual visions that I at least haven't heard yet, especially from the newest. I hope that they hear from us, sisters and brothers, welcome to this university. It seems such a simple greeting, but he might have said, ladies and gentlemen. That would have been polite too. But he didn't. He spoke of a kindred. He spoke of a family. And it might have been his hope speaking, but I hope it also was the feeling in that place. I wasn't there. I find myself imagining that he must have felt a welcome, and in response to that welcome, extended a welcome. Most of the people that he spoke to were Christian. All manner of us. If you go to the listing of the National Council of Churches right now, you will find there are 212 strands of Protestantism alone. We aren't so good at getting along. And we frequently think the right thing to do is go form yet another family. And inside we do things slightly differently. And then we get together and we read our scripture where we speak of one Lord, one faith, one baptism. That's a conversation I hope to have with Jesus at the dinner table, because we didn't seem to get that one right. Or you've heard already read a piece that I have put here at the beginning of my talk. When he says to that Congress, sectarianism, bigotry, and its horrible descendant, fanaticism, have long possessed this beautiful earth. He's looking backward from a time that predates the birth of my grandparents. He can see from his place there at the Parliament a nation that's only not quite 30 years removed from an era when we had to legislate the end of slavery. He's not looking at a world that's finished. He's looking at a world that's been plagued by things that he believes spirituality could respond to and change. At 150 years distant from his birth, we find ourselves left with scattered relics of his words, his travels, a map of the places he enjoyed, and even just a few stories from people who remember those whom he taught. Such unexpected locations as his followers coming here to teach in our philosophy department, or even a crazy place called Ridgely, New York, where now an order of nuns keeps a lovely home to which you and I may go. And there, Swami Vivekananda would travel and teach. The tree he taught under is there, and the nuns who keep the house welcome you still, with stories that a BBC reporter, if you go to the web you can read all about this also, recounts remembering her mother and her grandmother speaking about this, but at the time she didn't make much of it. On this 150th anniversary occasion, she went back to see this home that was once hers, and to realize that he had made a very, very large impact on a very widely scattered group of people. It was an important thing that he spoke to the Parliament of World Religions. I certainly don't stand here to tell you differently. But it seems to me perhaps even more important that he spoke to such ordinary people scattered all over the place, that he sat with them and had tea with them, welcomed their questions and their problems. The nuns in this place now say, that was Swami's sofa, the end room, that's where Swami used to sleep. I only thought George Washington got such treatment. And I love the fact that Swami Vivekananda's visits are remembered still with physical places. The BBC reporter tells a sweet story of going back herself and finding that those who had come devotionally actually almost wanted to touch her too, because her grandmother had been one of his followers and had in fact responded to his teaching by feeling relief from what to her was a narrow religious vision of her own time. Sisters and brothers, he strove in a very short time on this earth to provide a different vision of family, one that was racially more inclusive, one that was culturally more inclusive, one that was nationally more inclusive. And he spoke those words in a very young nation that was still trying to gather together its own legal culture. And he started something that I have to say, standing here, I feel I've inherited too. It was not my privilege to know him. I may read his words in the places they've been saved. But as we look out, I think his legacy to us is as the architect, not alone. I'm told he wouldn't like that. As an architect of the interfaith movement. It's a very squishy movement. I sometimes think it's made of jello. It's hard to contain, it's hard to describe, it's hard to tell where it's moving forward. But when we say that Vivekananda is revered as a saint in India, and yet in the West, he's not so broadly known. Gita Prana, who is I would call her the abbess of this wonderful place that we may visit in New York, said he would not have minded. He did not want to be worshipped slavishly or remembered for all eternity. He just wanted people to discover the prophet, Buddha, or the Christ within themselves. Those ideas in his time, in this nation, were absolutely unexpressed before then. They might have been known in the minds and hearts of those who had practiced in India and then moved to this country, but that number was small. The influx of the South Asian community to the United States would come much later. But how wonderful that these words had come so early. That there were those in Judaism and in Christianity who'd heard them and who passed them on, not quite knowing probably exactly what they were passing. Hans Kung ends a more relatively recent book entitled Global Responsibility with these words: no human life together without a world ethic for the nations. No peace among the nations without peace among the religions. No peace among the religions without dialogue among the religions. Swami Vivekananda, as the words of the hymn recount, left what was familiar. He came from India all this way with a bright and committed idea that he wished to teach, and in the teaching of it, to that august gathering there in Chicago, he left something so much bigger than the sapling that now is a huge tree in New York. He left things growing in people's hearts. He left questions that sisters and brothers gathered around a variety of tables can ask one another about. He left that seed that Hans Kung, the distinguished theologian in Christianity, speaks about when he says there will be no peace among the religions without dialogue among the religions. So whatever this interfaith movement is that Swami Vivekananda did so much to advance, it has something to do with that speaking and listening. But I think it's more about remembering what we speak to one another and what it is we hear when we listen and what it is we don't hear when we listen. When I leave my conversation with you and I realize that I did not understand what you said, I thought I did at the time, but now that I'm working on it, it's too hard for me. May we study again? Will you teach me again? May I try again to tell you what I was trying to say, which wasn't terribly clear either. Not because I didn't do my best, but because now I understand it better myself. We say this all the time to the students who take up the role of teaching assistant in our courses. We say to them, you think you understand something? Try teaching it. You will find out how little you really understand. Your student will ask you questions that you'll think, well, oh, I don't know. And you must go back and learn again. The notion of dialogue is not just two parties speaking at each other or taking turns announcing things. Dialogue is somehow rooted in two people beginning with their questions and beginning with their preliminary ideas, but knowing that in fact it won't be complete in the first talking. It will take repeated conversations. And as that repetition continues, I'd propose to you that those two dialogue partners stop being pugilists in an argument, people who are in some kind of a debating society. They begin to be friends together. And if they persist, they begin to be sisters and brothers at a table where, in time, the meal will be served. Another speaker at the Parliament of World Religions who closed the proceedings, his name was Charles Bonney, said this: henceforth the religions of the world will make war not on each other, but on the giant evils that afflict humankind. Sadly, religions have failed to fulfill that hope. Yet this century, for all its catastrophic wars and acts of genocide, has also seen the growth of a worldwide interfaith movement, writes Kung. He reflects on what it was that Bonney hoped could happen from that moment at that parliament, and he predicts that in fact there would need to be many parliaments. Not one where smart people would talk and leave enduring words, but a will for us to gather again and again and again and again, and to find in those gatherings, as we laid claim to one another as sisters and brothers in a conversation, the capacity to become family one to another, and the capacity to find the patience to wade through the places where we deeply disagree, where we do not trust each other, and where, in fact, those hatreds and bigotries and fanaticisms that Swami Vivekananda worried about could actually be addressed. The Parliament of World Religions in 1893 did in fact give birth to several things. Maybe beyond the hopes of those who gathered there, maybe as a result. One of those things was the study of world religions. It's grown in our universities, in popular culture, in publications, in the work of spiritual leaders. Frankly, in most traditions, it's been on the edge. of those traditions. Those who rise through the ranks of our traditions to become their leaders frequently only find their latitude to really speak about that cross-religious dialogue once they are in positions of fairly great esteem. It can seem eccentric to do so sooner, and may not be consistent with advancing in your tradition if that's your goal. That may even seem like an illegitimate goal for people to have in religion. But one of the things I don't know if those in 1893 who gathered could picture is the way the interfaith movement has moved far beyond clergy and scholars. It now belongs to the laity, as we clergy tend to refer to everybody who isn't like us. It's a very popular, democratic, proletariat sort of movement. And with the interface that the web provides, it's loose. There are people talking about spirituality in every part of the world. There are people able to publish their ideas without having some publisher tell them that's legitimate or not. And as a result, when you go and read, the range of ideas that's out there is broadening by the second. People who are 14 are writing to people who are 94. And everybody in between, the fancy folks and the ordinary folks, are seeming to gather at that table. It's not always clear who's allowed to address each other. The Parliament of 1893, it was very clear. And people only got invited who were clearly esteemed in their traditions. Now you can invite yourself. Now you can go and get your own book, and if you can't afford a book, you can find most of it on the web. This democratization, is that a funny word to use about spirituality? This democratization of God, of the holy, may in fact be the very revolution that those who gathered in 1893 hoped they could nourish. The need for it has never been greater. The capacity for violence in the world has grown far beyond anything they could have pictured. Our capacity, without even seeing one another, to kill one another, to ruin each other's cities, to damage each other's computer networks, to in fact leave radiation on the planet that will in fact damage the culture of our great-great-great-grandchildren and beyond, is a way of living that those who gathered in 1893, even in their science fiction, couldn't have pictured. But the challenge for people who understand that it is the life of the Spirit, it is the calling of the sacred, that actually has the capacity to transform the very boundaries, borders, hatreds, bigotries, and fanaticisms that plague us still. It is that capacity that is unstoppable. It cannot be thwarted. It resides in the souls of the tiniest children. It breathes in the hearts of the most senior among us. One needn't be decorated or graduated from any fancy university for that soul and spirit and light to emanate. And in fact, it would almost seem that the gifts of the web have enabled all of us to hear all of us. It's true, I'm told, that after Swami Vivekananda addressed the sisters and brothers who gathered, and he wanted to address the sisters and brothers of America, and mostly those in the room that he addressed were sisters and brothers of America, it's true that there was an ovation. People clapped. People were excited. People heard from him a confirmation that far beyond the borders of America, there was an interest, there was a spirit glowing that would somehow bring about a kind of peace. I feel the same thing as I listen in the ways that other disciplines beyond religion are now being impacted by spirituality. Where am I looking? I'm looking in environmental science. I'm looking in the world of medicine. I'm looking in the world of poetry and in the arts. It isn't just theologians anymore who are talking about these things and trying to bring about understanding and a breadth of expression. It's important that we not become ahistoric and lose that legacy that those going before us have so generously given. But the idea that it might begin to multiply, not arithmetically, but geometrically, is something that it seems to me can only have its roots in God. What are we still challenged by? Some of the same things that they faced. There are certainly disagreements within our religions. I won't belabor those that make my own tradition have 212 slices, but I expect by tomorrow it might be 214. We can pray for 210. It's true that interfaith organizations, as they have come together in different places and around different topics, have often not spoken to each other. They have organized in their own area, whether it be about peace building or about hunger amelioration or any other of the world's challenges, and not necessarily been well connected each to the other. And it's resulted in discouragement. People have come away feeling like they didn't get done what could have been done in their generation. Again, the time is right for people to be in touch with one another about the good that they are intending and the ways they can strengthen each other in the doing of it. Universities, in my judgment, it is the reason I've chosen where I am, strike me as unusually propitious places for people to begin these conversations. Students have come to Brown University just up the street from every country in the world. They come from every religious practice in the world. Some of them very devout, some of them pretty unacquainted, but they've come from those backgrounds. And as they move into each other's care and keeping, that is frequently the first moment for thinking, you seem not to know about me, or actually, I don't know much about you either. And off we go to a dialogue, to dinner, and to that list of questions that we certainly have for the saints and the great teachers, but we may practice on each other. We don't have to wait until our dinner partner is the Buddha or Jesus. It could be just me. Interfaith work also, it seems to me, has a very wonderful privilege, but also an obligation to move itself into areas of conflict in the world, and to do so bravely with the confidence that whatever it is that is sacred that impels our work will in fact infuse us with imagination and sustain us in the need to rescue those of our sisters and brothers who we not only address at meetings, but who need our address when their cities are war-torn, when their world has been taken by earthquake, when there is no food for the children, or when an economy has collapsed. Is this wishful thinking? Just pretty words to say on a Sunday afternoon? I not only hope not, I think I can prove to you differently. As I've watched graduates of this great university and several before this one, I see what it is they're out doing. They are changing the world. They are impelled by something that cannot be other than God. They persevere in situations that honestly would grind any lesser spirit to dust. They have taken the education that was their privilege to receive and have transformed it into the health and well-being of people, of critters, of engineering, of computer science, of every discipline. I may have met them in their prayer, but I see in their professions what it is they are bringing to life and how it is they are finding sisters and brothers, not only to eat with, but to sustain them in their work, far away from the homes that sent them to Brown. Much like Swami Vivekananda's family must have prayed for him as he took off from India. So perhaps one special contribution of faith, again Hans Kuhn, is for its capacity to inspire hope that change is possible. This is something other than analysis. This isn't just about sitting down with the economic indicators to figure out whether we're making headway or not. This is that kind of hope that Václav Havel told us eloquently is so much more than optimism. It is a certainty that comes from the sacred that whether things go well or not, the going, the doing, the being is of God, and the gift of life itself in the presence of that dilemma is in fact assurance that we will persevere and that good will prevail. Kung writes, although I have stressed the needs of the world as our next common interfaith agenda, and I think he's right about that, the hope and the energy to address this will come from the inner life of prayer and meditation. The source of practical action is spirituality. So I stand here to tell you, you might think in an occupational obvious statement, that in fact I don't think as an economist you'll do so well at all your analysis if you don't also commit yourself to a life of prayer and meditation. You must develop your inner life in order to be a wonderful environmental scientist. If your world is music and you wish to perform beautifully, your prayer will make your music shine. I want to close my remarks by sharing with you a beautiful parable that a lovely guy who's now retired from BU School of Theology and went off to teach on the West Coast. His name is Chung Seng Sung, and he is Chinese. Formosan, for most of his life, he thinks of himself that way. He's professor emeritus of theology and Asian cultures at Pacific School of Religion, and he's still acting as a minister in the Formosan United Methodist Church. He tells this story. A giant snake, enormously powerful, was coiling itself around the globe. The globe seemed too weak to withstand the pressure. I could see the first cracks in it. Then I saw the light at the center of the world. Enter into this light, I was told, but I resisted. But the light was irresistible. I went towards it, and as I did so, I saw many others moving toward it too, and the snake's grip gradually began to loosen. There is a miracle of miracles at the center of all of our struggle, at the place where we think death is most certain. That is where the light shines most brightly. That is the place where, if we can, in the power of our traditions, confident of the sacred to sustain us in all that we do, if we can move to the place where the challenge to address one another as sisters and brothers is the very hardest, where we don't trust one another, where the only way I think it's safe to advance to your neighborhood is with my gun. If I can set it down and move there, I will find myself living in a neighborhood of sisters and brothers who are gathered around that light. It isn't the light that says the world we know will endure. The world that Swami Vivekananda addressed in 1893 is largely gone. Think of it. You can hear me through this microphone. We are sitting illumined by bulbs that barely existed. In your pocket is a phone that you've turned off but connects you to the whole world. There is so much that he could not have pictured. But what he knew was that the interfaith movement that he was compelled to speak about and to take the risk to call people that he didn't even know, with whom he didn't share a continent or a religion or an educational institution or even a language, to take the risk to address those people as sisters and brothers was to put him at the table with that light shining in the center. For us to gather there, to speak to one another, to raise our hardest questions, and to come back together, confident that that table will be there and that our conversation need not be complete. That's what it takes for there to be peace in Syria, or peace in Egypt, or bread on the table in the Sudan, or a cure for any one of the illnesses that threatens the life of somebody you love. Sisters and brothers, to be gathered at this table, to risk speaking in this open way with you, is not only an honor and a privilege, it's life itself. We're called to it briefly, Our years as Vivekanandas were maybe very short. But the radiance of that light doesn't stop. And it didn't start with us either. We may confidently open ourselves to it and know that it's of God. We may trust that it will continue to our life's end and beyond, and gather the people who are drawn to the sacred and who empower their work on behalf of their sisters and brothers with that spirit. May it always be so. May the hospitality of this beautiful place continue to shine in the spirit of Swami Vivekananda.
Many thanks, dear Janet. As always, you were very brilliant in your exposition of these ideas of interfaith dialogue and arousing the divinity in us to see that environment outside is also made harmonious and peaceful. Next we will have a song, a Hindi song on Swami Vivekananda.
आशुतोष शिव जय सुखगंध जय जय स्वामी विवेकानंद त्रिभुवन पावन नर नारायण विमल बोध घन ब्रह्मपरायण त्रिभुवन पावन नर नारायण विमल बोध घन ब्रह्मपरायण भवभयवारण जगद तारण भवभयवारण जगद धारण नित्य मुक्त जय गत भवबंध जय जय स्वामी विवेकानंद जय वीरेश्वर ब्रह्महर भास्कर आशुतोष शिव जय सुखकंद जय जय स्वामी विवेकानंद युगनायक युग धनुषायक चित प्रकाशक शुभमतिदायक युगनायक युग धर्मशायक चित प्रकाशक शुभमतिदायक मोह पुंज हर मोक्ष विधायक मोह पुंज हर मोक्ष विधायक वीर धीर निर्भय संचन्न जय जय स्वामी विवेकानंद जय वीरेश्वर ब्रह्महर भास्कर आशुतोष शिव जय सुखगंध जय जय स्वामी विवेकानंद विधृत चिंत प्रबोधनकारी मूढ़ जीव जड़ता परिहारी निकृत चित्त प्रबोधनकारी मोघ जीव जड़ता परिहारी राम कृष्ण लीला सहचारी राम कृष्ण लीला सहचारी नाश करो प्रभु भव दुख द्वंद जय जय स्वामी विवेकानंद जय वीरेश्वर भ्रमहर भास्कर जय वीरेश्वर भ्रमहर भास्कर आशुतोष शिव जय सुखकंद जय जय स्वामी विवेकानंद जय जय स्वामी जय जय स्वामी जय जय स्वामी विवेकानंद.
Now I request Father John Sullivan to elaborate on this topic. Father John Sullivan is a priest at the famous La Salette Shrine in Attleboro. I am sure most of you have gone there, especially during that lights in the month of December evening. So many people go there. So I have known him for past 5-6 years since I started going to the meetings of a very special interfaith group in Attleboro. Father John Sullivan was one of the founder members of this group, and I was very much impressed by the genuine spiritual outlook that he brought at our meetings. He is really Catholic, means very broad and inclusive. Once, long back, when I was in Shillong, a Catholic priest had come to us, and then I asked him that, well, what would you like to eat? And he humorously said, as far as food is concerned, I am very Catholic. He is very Catholic in his views and deeply involved in community services. Over the years, we have become good friends on the common basis of religious harmony and love of God. He had spoken at the Universal Brotherhood Day a few years back too, and everyone had loved his talk. I am very thankful that he agreed to come today to Father John Sullivan.
Well, like Janet, it's a very great privilege for me to speak here tonight. I find it just very humbling, and I'm very grateful to be back for the second time. I remember the last time I was here, I spoke on nonviolence, which I find very much at the heart of my life. Basically, from Jesus' own teachings on loving your enemy. But even with my own community, my own La Salette community, as well as the people that come to the shrine at La Salette, I would be hesitant to give the same talk that I gave here, because I felt an openness here. I felt a lack of judgment. I felt a deep sense of acceptance and respect for what I wanted to say. And that's maybe part of my growing knowledge of Jesus. He is such a revolutionary in the very deepest sense of the word, how he wants to change things, really upset the apple cart in a very profound way. And yet how we hold on to our own conceptions of him instead of really letting him be himself. And as Swami Vivekananda would say, to come to that deeper awareness of the Christ in each of us, of the God in each of us. And that's why I'm so grateful to be here tonight and to have an opportunity to share a little bit more. Again, the topic of my talk tonight is, in the end, it all comes down to loving. Loving in the very best way that we can. And I believe I'm coming here on a historic occasion. Last night I watched TV, one of the Catholic stations, and for 4 hours, 100,000 people were praying in Vatican City, led by Pope Francis, praying for peace and an end to violence in Syria, in the Middle East, and throughout the world. And I was struck by that. I heard, even as I was coming down on the radio today, that there was a large group of Muslim people dressed in their own habits, their own clothes, familiar with them, in one section. There were people, many tourists, mixed in with those people who would go to the Vatican because it is the center of the Roman Catholic Church. And I was struck that the center of that was the Eucharist, what we believe is the full presence of Jesus in all his divinity and humanity, body and soul, that in that what appears to be a little piece of bread, we believe is Christ himself in all his fullness. And to see him, Pope Francis, which the more I know about him, the more I love him, how much he was there just reverently praying, and how he gave us a talk before the Blessed Sacrament was exposed. It was so challenging, coming out of the book of Genesis, and how can we pray for peace and reconciliation in the world if we don't realize that the Cain in us, the Cain that killed his own brother Abel, and how much we constantly have to be aware of the need to overcome our own limitations in loving one another and letting God speak through us and in us. So it was a privilege just to see people coming up. There were 2 Franciscan brothers. There were a man and a woman coming up, putting up incense in a pot that was right in front of the Blessed Sacrament. You see the flame coming up as they added the incense. Because with so many people, they must have all smelt that incense, and what a beautiful symbol that is in so many religions, symbolically of our prayers raising to God. So it really was beautiful to see that, and I'd like to end tonight with the prayer for peace in Syria. But to begin my talk, I am grateful for Swami Yogananda's invitation, and I do consider it a great privilege to call him my friend. And we have been meeting together in many different places of worship in the Attleboro area. And at first, when we met, I know I felt a little bit fearful. As a Catholic, am I going to be challenged in ways that I'm going to get defensive, or I'm going to not understand what someone else is saying? But over the years, and I'm sure Swami would agree with me, we've come to grow in speaking not from here. I'm Irish, what can you say? I'm very emotional sometimes. But we speak from the heart. And we find so much in common. Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, Jewish, and Christian. And how we've come to a deep awareness of our own faith. Rather than question my faith, I have become so much more committed to my faith because of my sharing with my brothers and sisters. And how we have come, as it says here, the truth is one, but there's many different expressions of it. And how we constantly have to relearn that. I know I have to learn that. And what comes from that is a broader and broader vision of the world today, that I begin to have a sense of how God thinks, and how Swami Vivekananda expressed that so beautifully, and as I learned about him and studied a little bit more about his life. And so on this talk tonight, on the day in which we recognize the universal brotherhood, it's so beautiful to know of how we are, all of us, are called to be light, called to be, as Jesus said at one point, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Can we dare to say that even about ourselves? That we can be a way to lead others to God. That we somehow try to personify the truth by the way we relate. And as Pope Francis he loves St. Francis of Assisi, who says that preach at all times, and when you need to, use words. And I love that expression, because we speak the truth very often more by what we do than what we say. And how important it is that we, like the Alcoholics Anonymous, we not just talk the talk, we've got to walk the walk. You know, the truth of that sets us free, the truth that is one. And that I am the life, that we could find life even in the midst of all the darkness in the world today. And I agree, as Janet's saying, that the more we pray, no matter what profession we have, the more we begin to see that life all around us. The beauty of life that comes out even in the ashes of violence and senseless destruction. Life is still there. And so I want to thank also Pat Blake. Pat is also a member of our interfaith group, who helped me to learn more about the wonderful life of Swami Vivekananda. She gave me a video of his visit to America titled Footsteps in New England. It's a lovely video, and I really encourage you to see it. I was not only fascinated by the man, but also struck by the beauty of the state of Massachusetts, where I was born and where I grew up. The video captured so well how God speaks to us through the grandeur of autumn colors and running streams. So I really encourage you to see that video if you haven't seen it yet, of his visit to America, but especially focused on New England. Swami Vivekananda teaches us to look for the harmony and unity in religion, and not be influenced by fanaticism, bigotry, or sectarianism. I especially liked his little book, A Bold Message for World Peace. And he really does have a beautiful way of leading us to world peace, if only we can overcome especially that fanaticism that leads to so much violence, that makes us foolishly think that we have a monopoly on the truth, and that my truth is superior to your truth, instead of recognizing the connection between us. So I'd like to make a few references to that book, as well as some of my own experiences from my own faith journey. And so I give this title that all comes down to loving, because I believe in the depths of my heart that God is love. And the more we live in the experience of love, the more we know God and experience God himself, or God herself, not confining God obviously to the male gender. Swami Vivekananda stated, love and charity for the whole human race, that is the test of true religiousness. I do not mean the sentimental statement that all men are brothers, but that one must feel the oneness of human life. The test of true religiousness is that call to be aware of how we need to pray with our whole beings. So when he says, feel the oneness, I understand love is a true decision of the will, and not just a feeling. We can choose to love another even when, or especially when, that's the last thing we feel like doing. So love it captures obviously the whole person, our mind, our hearts, our souls, our spirits, our physical being, and how the more we practice loving as God teaches us, the better we become at it, the more God becomes present in the lives of each of us. He goes on to say that the end of all religions is the realizing of God in the soul. I love that. The end of all religion is the realizing of God in the soul. That's a real mouthful. Love, when we can grow beyond the ego, the me as the center, we come to real eyes. So there's two ways of spelling that. Besides R-E-A-L-I-Z-E, we also have R-E-A-L-E-Y-E-S. We have real eyes by which we begin to see in both the tragedies and joys of other people's lives, my joys and tragedies, so that I become one with them in compassion for their suffering and also laughing in their joy. My favorite quote in the Christian Bible is from the Gospel of John, chapter 17, verses 21 to 22. It was spoken at the Last Supper on the night before Jesus died. And I love to, whenever I come here, I love to look at the pictures of the saints there on the altar, and Jesus on the right in the Garden of Olives. And he said these words shortly before he went out to the Garden of Olives. Even though he knew he was going to be crucified, even though he knew that his life was so short and time was so limited, he spoke from the center of his very life, speaking out loud to his Father in the company of his disciples. I pray not only for them, but also for those who will believe in me through their word, so that they may all be one as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us, that the world may believe that you sent me. I'd like to read that again. I pray not only for them, and the them at first was a reference to his disciples, because the whole chapter 17 of John's Gospel is called the priestly prayer. It's a beautiful, beautiful chapter of Jesus is speaking to the Father. But when he goes on, not just the disciples, but also for those, that's you and I, that's us. 2,000 years later, he is praying this prayer for us, that all those who believe in me through the word of the apostles that begins this process, that they may all be one as you, Father, are in me and I in you. And there's no greater unity than that, than the oneness of Jesus with the Father and the power of his Spirit. I believe that so deeply as a Catholic, but I believe Swami Vivekananda would agree with me in that prayer for oneness, that they also may be one in us, that the world may believe that you sent me. And it goes on, and that they may love one another as you love me. That quote was on my ordination card 43 years ago. And I continue to find such strength from that chapter 17, verse 21. It's my mantra, in a sense. It's this quote that I try to gauge my life by, to overcome racism, to overcome all that separates us from one another. And also, as proudly as a missionary of Our Lady of La Salette, for those of you that have come to the shrine, perhaps know that, and I do have a few pamphlets, if anybody likes afterwards, about the symbol of Our Lady of La Salette, particular to that apparition, as we may know of Lourdes and Fatima and Guadalupe, many places that she appeared. But the key word is reconciliation. That's the charism of my community. And we work now in 25 countries around the world. We're not very huge like the Franciscans or the Jesuits or the Dominicans, but we find great strength. They're one of the few men's communities formed by a woman, formed by the Mother of God. And today, do you know, today is her birthday, the 8th of September. I find that striking too, that I'm here tonight. Because in our parishes many times we celebrated the readings of the day, which are beautiful. Today's readings about the call to discipleship. But I found out later this morning, it was a little bit too late, that being a Marian shrine, we could have used the readings for the feast day of Mary, our mother. And I really mean that, our mother, not my mother, as God is our Father and not my Father. And so 2,000 years later, the dream of Jesus is that we may be one as he is one with the Father. No greater unity exists. A human being, one with the divine, God the Father. I am confident that this prayer could also be Swami Vivekananda's and his hopes for all humanity, united in love, in the one God, not just in our churches or our temples or our mosques, but here in our hearts, that we may come more and more to that awareness of the oneness that Jesus prayed for on the night before he died. Love is so much more than a decision or an act of the will. Although it truly is that, it is also a father's hand extended to his child, a mother hugging her son after he leaves from a detox center after excessive drinking, or two enemies deciding to forgive each other from wounds of the past and trying to live in the peace of the present moment. I want to give two examples of people who personify this centrality of love in our lives, a Hindu and a young Christian, Mahatma Gandhi and John Leary. John Leary was a 24-year-old Catholic who lived at Haley House, which is one of the Catholic worker houses in Boston. And the Catholic worker movement is a very powerful movement that has produced some of the greatest prophets in the Catholic Church, and I believe in many religions. But the Catholic worker is just that. It's a movement geared around workers aware of their Catholic faith, but trying to live the social teachings of the Catholic Church, especially a love for the poor. And their founder was Dorothy Day and a Frenchman who, together the two of them, Peter Morin, and they formed this movement that has done so much to renew the church. And even now, her name is up for canonization. And she is a woman a single mother. She had an abortion. She was a communist at one time. She was in love with a man, and she wrote beautiful, in a sense, erotic letters about her love for him. And she might be proclaimed a saint of the Catholic Church. Praise the Lord. What that could do, you know? But she's a beautiful woman to read about. But this young man, John Leary, he lived at the Catholic worker, and he had a profound love for the poor. He went out jogging one day, and unfortunately he died of a heart attack on the street. And but he wrote a prayer that he would say each day with his whole heart. And I'd like to read that prayer. Father, I abandon myself into your hands. Do with me as you will. Whatever you may do, I thank you. I am ready for all. I accept all. Let only your will be done in me and in all your creatures. I wish no more than this, O Lord. Into your hands I commend my soul. I offer it to you with all the love of my heart. For I love you, Lord, and so need to give myself, to surrender myself into your hands, without reserve and with boundless confidence, for you are my Father. Amen. I find it such a beautiful prayer, such a prayer of abandonment of his own ego. I don't know about you, but that's my daily struggle, my own ego. It's so sinister, and it loves to get it wiggle its way into my thoughts and my conversations. I like to be the center of attention, and how that takes away from the God in me. And when I don't mean self-confidence. I believe I'm growing in that more and more, but I believe in that ego that somehow I consider myself superior to somebody else. And that's like a cancer. It can do so much destruction. And there's no saint that was an egotist. All the saints are so humble. They overcome that ego. And that's the battle that we have. To me, that's the original sin, the pride that says, I am the center of my world, instead of realizing God and the things of God are really what makes my life worthwhile. And so that prayer, to me, I find so attractive. His radical obedience to God, a 24-year-old young man, completely to do God's will in his life, transformed to grow beyond the narrow confines of his own ego to the limitless grandeur of God's own love. So I find that so attractive, and that's why I wanted to mention him in my talk. And then, of course, so many of us know about Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, so much a personification of the heart of my understanding of Jesus, of nonviolent love. I heard even the man that shot him in the chest, as he died, he forgave the man who did that to him. What a tremendous message. And hopefully, as Janet was saying, how his teaching will become more and more world-renowned by all religions. But I come from a quote from John Deere, who is a Jesuit priest who is still very much active in the work of nonviolence, peace, and justice. He wrote about Gandhi. Gandhi reportedly spent 2 hours in meditation each day, 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening, for more than 40 years. This became the bedrock for all his daily work for justice, independence, and service. Most of his meditation time was in silence, but he always read from the Sermon on the Mount, and that's from the Gospel of Matthew. It's chapters 5, 6, and 7. But probably the lines that we are most familiar with are the 8 blesseds. For example, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And how Gandhi would pray with that over 40 years. And the commandment to love our enemies and those who persecute us is also part of the Sermon on the Mount. Another part is, you are a light of the world, you are the salt of the earth. There's so much in those 3 chapters. But he also meditated on the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu scriptures. And this is a quote: I have not been able to see any difference between the Sermon on the Mount and the Bhagavad Gita, he once confessed. And how so few Christians know that, and how much we have to educate ourselves in the richness of these different traditions in the church and the world, our mosques and temples, and how much we could overcome the violence and hatred that is so much a part of our world. And that's why we have to pray that President Obama, I chose him as my president, but I'm so disappointed. I hesitate to hear his talk in the next few days, defending the choice to go to Syria and to drop bombs or some kind of missiles in reaction to the tragedy of the poisonous gas that was used to kill over 1,000 people, many of them children. But we know violence is not the answer. All religions say that. And the more we can come to the Swami Vivekananda's understanding of one religion in many different expressions, the more we could overcome so much of that, again, that ego, that I want to be in control. I want to be superior to you. I want my opinion to dominate your opinion. None of that is of God. And I loved a beautiful quote from Swami Vivekananda, that there's no greater force in the world than love. And once he said remarks on how knowing God transforms us. When you have known God, your very face will be changed. Your voice will be changed. And your whole appearance will be changed. You will be a blessing to mankind. I love that. And from reading his book and seeing the video, there was something about him that was so attractive because he was so centered on God. And that's why he made friends wherever he went. And he has such a profound influence in the short amount of time that he was here in our own country. So now I'd like to conclude with a prayer for peace in Syria. And this is a prayer from the Catholics Confront Global Poverty in collaboration with the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. God of compassion, hear the cries of the people of Syria. Bring healing to those suffering from the violence. Bring comfort to those mourning the dead. Strengthen Syria's neighbors in their care and welcome for refugees. convert the hearts of those who have taken up arms, and protect those committed to peace. God of hope, inspire leaders to choose peace over violence and to seek reconciliation with enemies. Inspire the church around the world with compassion for the people of Syria, and to give us hope for a future of peace built on justice for all. We ask this through Jesus Christ, Prince of Peace and Light of the world. Amen. Amen. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. Now I request John Schlenk and other singers to present 3 songs, 2 of which are poems by Swami Vivekananda, one of them being Peace, and then one song that Vivekananda used to sing in Bengali to Sri Ramakrishna. The translation of it will be presented here.
We will sing first 2 of Swamiji's poems, both of which were composed at Ridgely, which Dr. Nelson referred to. It was a time of rest and recuperation for Swamiji before he began his wonderful work in California. And one of them was composed on the occasion when Sister Nivedita took the nun's garb. And the other was something he gave to Josephine MacLeod after composing it that day. Oh, yet a while strong heart, not part a lifelong yoke, though blighted looks the present future gloom. An age it seems since you and I began our march uphill or down, sailing smooth o'er seas that are so rare, thou nearer unto me than oft times I myself, proclaiming mental moves before they were. Reflect the truth, like also time to mine, thou perfect note of thoughts, however fine, shall we now part, recorder sing. In thee is friendship, faith, for thou didst warn when evil thoughts were brewing, and though alas thy warning thrown away, went on the same as ever, good and true. Behold, it comes in light, the path that is not power, the light that is in darkness, the shade in dazzling light. It is joy that never spoke, and grief unfelt profound. Immortal life unhid, eternal death unmourned. It is not joy nor sorrow, but that which is not night nor morrow, but that which joins them in. It is sweet rest in music and pause in sacred art. The silence between speaking, between two fits of passion, it is the calm of heart. It is beauty never seen, and love that stands alone. It is song that lives unsung, and knowledge never known. It is death between two lives, and love between two stars. The void whence rose creation, and that when it returns. To it the teardrop blows, to spread the smiling thorn. It is the goal of life, and peace is only home. The third song we will sing is a translation of the first song that Swamiji sang for Sri Ramakrishna when he visited him first in Dakshineswar. And the master, hearing this, went into samadhi. Let us go back to our own abode. Conceal our provisions well, greed and pride like bandits lie, waiting for pilgrims passing by, eager to rob each virtue gain from the unprotected soul. Thus take for gods along the way, watchfulness and self-control. Oh, my mind, let us abide with holiness. Here is a wayside resting place, where weary travelers are granted grace.
Many thanks, John, for coming all the way from New York to Providence on our invitation. We have been singing some of his compositions here, and I had hoped that someday we can get him here. And you see how wonderful job he has done. He was amply supported by Peter Travisano on guitar, and all the wonderful bunch of singers. And now I request the third speaker here for this evening is Professor Jeffrey Long from the University of the Elizabethtown College in Pennsylvania. He is a professor of religion and Asiatic studies, and he has been a keen follower and a devoted student of the life and teachings of Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, and has written quite a few articles and books. He has spoken about Swami Vivekananda at various places. One of the articles has recently appeared in Hinduism Today about Swami Vivekananda. He has written a couple of books and many articles. A book is titled as Vision of Hinduism Beyond Hindu Nationalism, and an introduction to Jainism. He will speak about Swami Vivekananda, the teacher of religion beyond borders.
Good evening, namaste. I have the unusual distinction of being the high-tech presenter tonight. That's usually not the case for me, but I do have this PowerPoint, and with a lot of help from our friends here, hopefully we can it will go smoothly. I just want to say first, I want to thank Swami Yogatmanandaji for inviting me here. It's a real blessing and an honor to be part of this wonderful program. Like Father Sullivan, I'm Irish, and I've found myself on the verge of tears several times this evening from the beautiful words of the speakers to the profound music and the message coming through, and it's just a real honor for me to be here. I want to say also that I had intended to dress a little more formally this evening, but Swami Yogatmananda thought that my t-shirt that I was wearing earlier today, as I trudged all over Providence, suited the theme of this evening sufficiently that I would go ahead and wear it. So thank you, Swamiji. So I want to speak this evening on Swami Vivekananda and his philosophy of religious pluralism, which we've already heard about so beautifully and so eloquently. I probably have little to add. But this is how I understand Swamiji based on the research that I've been doing. And I've got some quotes here also, and we've already heard some of them this evening as well. So I'm just going to elaborate a little on this. There's a very ancient Hindu tradition of doing what's called a bhashya, or commentary, on a sutra. A sutra is a very profound saying or aphorism that is sometimes quite difficult to understand in isolation, but it requires a commentator to explain and unpack it. And sometimes I think Swami Vivekananda's words are like sutras. They're so full of meaning that we can, every time we read them, we can get something different from them. So I just want to elaborate a little bit on some of his words this evening. We've already heard a couple of references to the wonderful first address that he will have given 120 years ago this Wednesday, 9/11/1893, the great address beginning Sisters and Brothers of America. And one of the themes of that presentation is the idea that Swamiji's message is not only one of tolerance, but of acceptance. As I will sometimes say to my students, if you were to go back to your room this evening and your roommate were to tell you, "I tolerate you," would that be a compliment? How would you feel good if you went home, or those of you that say, if you went home to your family and your spouse, your partner, or your child, or your parent said, "I tolerate you," it would probably be a really bad day, actually. Tolerance is, of course, better than intolerance, and we have way too much of that in the world. But I would like to underscore the fact that Swami Vivekananda's message is not only that we should coexist, as the T-shirt says, but we want to go even beyond that to acceptance. He says, I am proud to belong to a religion which has taught the world both tolerance and universal acceptance. We believe not only in universal toleration, but we accept all religions as true. So he elaborates on this a little further as well. In another lecture given a few years later, he says, our watchword then will be acceptance and not exclusion. Not only toleration, for so-called toleration is often blasphemy, and I do not believe in it. I believe in acceptance. Why should I tolerate? Toleration means that I think that you are wrong, and I'm just allowing you to live. Is it not blasphemy to think that you and I are allowing others to live? I accept all religions that were in the past and worship with them all. I worship God with every one of them in whatever form they worship Him. And if you go back and read the entire lecture, it's called Realizing the Ideal of a Universal Religion. He, after this part that I've quoted, goes on at great length in an almost poetic vein to talk about how he will pray, he will bow before the cross of the Christians, he will take refuge in the Dharma of the Buddha, and he talks about several religious traditions, Islam, Judaism, and he says, I will worship with them all. Now, this raises a logical question for those of us who are philosophically minded. How can it be that many religions, which often teach things that, at least on the surface, don't appear to be consistent with one another, how can these all be true? It can be a beautiful sentiment to say, I accept all of these things as true. But if you're trying to figure out your own worldview and what really is the case, it can be puzzling to say, well, I accept all of these as true, but they seem to be saying different things. Well, Swami Vivekananda was not unaware of this. And so he elaborates on what he means by this as well. He says, are all the religions of the world really contradictory? I do not mean the external forms in which great thoughts are clad. I do not mean the different buildings, languages, rituals, books, etc. employed in various religions, but I mean the internal soul of every religion. His understanding is that, yes, on the surface there will be enormous diversity, wonderful diversity, and in another beautiful quote that we heard earlier this evening, I don't have it in my presentation, but he actually affirms a very strong hope that the world religions will continue to proliferate. Let there be as many sects, as many denominations, as many ways of life as we can conceive. And he sometimes makes reference, I find very interestingly, to religion of the future also. And think of all the various ways of thinking and living that have come about just since his time. But yes, that can be diverse, it can even be contradictory. But each of these is embodying some deeper principle. He says every religion has a soul behind it, and that soul may differ from the soul of another religion. But are they contradictory? Do they contradict or supplement each other? That is the question. I believe that they're not contradictory, they're supplementary. Each religion, as it were, takes up one part of the great universal truth and spends its whole force in embodying and typifying that part of the great truth. It is therefore addition, not exclusion. That is the idea. System after system arises, each one embodying a great idea, and ideals must be added to ideals, and this is the march of humanity. Ideals may differ, but they don't necessarily contradict. So the universal justice affirmed in Islam, and the universal love affirmed in Christianity, and the impermanence of all material things affirmed in the Buddhist tradition, and the fundamental unity of all existence affirmed in Vedanta. These aren't contradictory ideas, they're different ideas, but they're not contradictory. We can see them as all parts of the great universal truth. What Swami Vivekananda is calling for in practical terms is not that everyone has to believe the same thing or convert to a particular creed or religion. The ideal is dialogue and mutual transformation, not conversion. And in his typically dramatic and powerful style, Swami Vivekananda says, and we've heard this quote earlier this evening, "Do I wish the Christian would become Hindu? God forbid. Do I wish that the Hindu or Buddhist would become Christian? God forbid. The seed is put in the ground, and earth and air and water are placed around it. Does the seed become the earth, or the air, or the water? No, it becomes a plant. It develops after the law of its own growth, assimilates the air, the earth, and the water, converts them into plant substance, and grows into a plant. Similar is the case with religion. The Christian is not to become a Hindu or a Buddhist, nor a Hindu or a Buddhist to become a Christian, but each must assimilate the spirit of the others, and yet preserve his individuality and grow according to his own law of growth." I don't think Swami Vivekananda is here forbidding or disallowing that someone might, in the course of their journey, find they identify more with another tradition than the one in which they started. Such a person might, as it were, convert. Is Swami Vivekananda forbidding this? God forbid, I would say. But, and the fact that he initiated disciples and brought people from the Western world into Vedanta shows that he was not opposed to that. He didn't say, no, just go back and study what you grew up with. But what is his point? His point is that this whole process is not about a label. It's not about whether you identify yourself as a member of religion X, Y, or Z. You are who you are. And in the course of encountering these other wonderful ideas and traditions, like the seed transforming into a plant, we are absorbing all of these elements from all the world's religions. And the process that was mentioned earlier about how the communication that we have around the world now, how we have such instant contact with everything. And can you imagine that we are living in a time when all the great scriptures of all the world's religions are as far away as your iPhone? It is really a marvelous time in which we're living, in the sense of our access to wisdom. Each religion contributes to human progress. Each one is part of the great idea that advances us. How we each assimilate those is unique to us, ourselves. He's saying his template is that there is no template. There is not one universal pattern that he wants us all to follow, but that we each assimilate and absorb from the others according to our own nature. Each religion contributes to the advancement of all humanity. My idea, he says, is that all these religions are different forces in the economy of God, working for the good of mankind, of the good of humanity, and that not one can become dead, not one can be killed. Just as you cannot kill any force in nature, so you cannot kill any one of these spiritual forces. You have seen that each religion is living. From time to time it may retrograde or go forward. At one time it may be shorn of a good many of its trappings, at another it may be covered with all sorts of trappings. But all the same, the soul is ever there. It can never be lost. The ideal which every religion represents is never lost, and so every religion is intelligently on the march. Now, sometimes we don't feel that we're so intelligently on the march as humanity. Sometimes it seems like we're walking backwards blindfold if we watch the news and look at what's going on. But Swamiji is looking over the long duration of human history and really cosmic history, that the eternal ideals at the core of each tradition, those are, well, eternal. They are enduring. They will not perish or pass away, even though the form in which they are presented may change constantly, even with dizzying speed in our current world. Now, to what is this process leading? What is the future that we can imagine if humanity is intelligently on the march in the way that Swami Vivekananda envisions? And what happens if we're all, if the Hindu is absorbing aspects of Christianity and Buddhism, the Buddhist is absorbing aspects of Hinduism and Christianity, the Christian is absorbing aspects of Hinduism and Buddhism? Is there a kind of convergence that happens? And Swamiji says there might be. He says, but if there ever is to be a universal religion, it must be one which will hold no location in place or time, which will be infinite like the God it will preach, whose sun shines upon the followers of Krishna or Christ, saints or sinners alike, which will not be the Brahmin or Buddhist, Christian or Muslim, but the sum total of all these, and still have infinite space for development. He did not believe in a static final conclusion, that even a grand synthesis of world religions would not be the end of the process. There needs to be infinite space for development. The feeling that one gets very often, the feeling I get certainly when I read Swami Vivekananda, is of someone very impatient with the idea of limitations, that truth is infinite, Brahman is infinite, reality is infinite, and we must ever break the bonds of our self-imposed limitations and venture into that infinite space. Now, what is the foundation of this teaching? I want to say a few words about that as well this evening. From the wonderful presentations we've had and the experience, this satsang that we're all having together, we all know this is very beautiful, very moving, very compelling. Where does it come from? What is the basis for Swami Vivekananda of his teaching? And sometimes the question is raised, particularly in Hindu circles, is this an authentically Hindu teaching? Does it come from scripture? Does it come from the Rig Veda or the Bhagavad Gita? And certainly you can see passages in those texts which could justify it. However, what Swamiji says himself is, my teaching is my own interpretation of our ancient books in the light which my master shed upon them. And I would have underlined that if I'd thought to. It just occurred to me. In the light which my master shed upon them. Sri Ramakrishna, of course. I claim no supernatural authority. Whatever in my teaching may appeal to the highest intelligence and be accepted by thinking people, the adoption of that will be my reward. It's not based on any one single book or scripture. It is based on the light shed upon the tradition that Swami Vivekananda knew by his master Sri Ramakrishna, who, as I'm sure everyone knows, practiced in his lifetime the paths of many religions and many forms of spirituality, achieving realization in each. The ultimate basis is a direct experience of the divinity within us all, finding God within our own soul, as Father Sullivan was mentioning. What does it mean to experience God? God within. And another one of Swamiji's sort of almost shocking statements that he liked to make. Can we see God? Of course not. Can we know God? Of course not. If God can be known, he will be God no longer. Knowledge is limitation. Remember how impatient he is with limitation. But I and my Father are one. I find the reality in my soul. These ideas are expressed in some religions and in others only hinted. They're there everywhere, sometimes very prominently, sometimes in symbolic forms, and so on. Now, of course, one of the first conversations Swami Vivekananda had with Sri Ramakrishna is the famous one in which he said, "Have you seen God?" And Sri Ramakrishna said, "Yes, I have." And of course, if you're a member of our Vedanta tradition, we have a book called How to Know God. So this statement can look a little shocking. Can you see God? Of course not. Can you know God? Of course not. But Swami Tyagananda has elaborated upon, has given a bhashya on this expression. He says, Swamiji is here drawing a distinction between knowledge, in quotation marks, which involves objectification and the instrumentality of the mind and the senses, and finding the reality in my soul, which is direct experience, not filtered through the mind and the senses. And this is, if you know Swami Tyagananda, a typically erudite statement of his. Swamiji himself also gives us a very powerful explanation. I think it's one of the most poetic moments in all of his complete works. It's one of my personal favorites. He's explaining what true knowledge would be. Knowledge not in our conventional sense of objectification through the medium of the mind. He says the soul, he uses this term Purusha from Sankhya philosophy, from Indian philosophy. He says the soul does not love, it is love itself. It does not exist, it is existence itself. The soul does not know, it is knowledge itself. It is a mistake to say the soul loves, exists, or knows. Love, existence, and knowledge are not the qualities of the soul. The qualities of the Purusha, they are its essence. So knowing it is not like knowing something external to oneself through the mind. It is being it and being aware of one's being as it. You are that, as the Upanishads say. The fountainhead of all knowledge is the direct experience of the self, not the ego, but the divine self that dwells within all beings. I think in an academic environment, this would probably be followed by a question and answer session. So this is just a cute thing there. I think we're going to have some more music and move on to the next part of the program. But thank you for the privilege of speaking to you today.
Thank you, Professor Jeffrey Long. And now we will have a dance on one of the songs about Swami Vivekananda written by one of his disciples, Sharat Chandra Chakravarti. The song is very famous, and presenting the dance is Anuradha. She has performed here before as well. She is an expert Bharatanatyam dancer as well as teacher of dance. She also teaches dance here.
Murta
Thank you, Anuradha. That was very beautiful. The meaning of the song is something like this, that I am saluting Swami Vivekananda, who is like the Lord Shiva incarnate, and who is telling us to be fearless, to overcome fear. And just by a glance, he can impart devotion and supreme wisdom to us. She has performed very beautifully, as always. Thank you again. And now, we are almost near conclusion. Another song that we always play on this occasion, and that is Namaste.
Namaste, namaste. I salute the divine in you. In India they say what's so true. I salute the divine in you. You may be from Africa, you may be from Asia, you may be from Australia, but there's something the same in all of us. Namaste, namaste. I salute the divine in you. In India they say what's so true. I salute the divine in you. You may be from America, you may be from Europe, you may be from the islands, but there is something the same in all of us. Namaste, namaste. I salute the divine in you. In India they say what's so true. I salute the divine in you. You may be a Christian, you may be Islamic, you may be the Hindu, but there's something the same in all of us. Namaste, namaste. I salute the divine in you. In India they say what's so true. I salute the divine in you. If you be American, Buddhist or Taoist, or if you are a Hindu, there is something the same in all of us. Namaste, namaste. I salute the divine in you. In India they say what's so true. I salute the divine in you. Namaste, namaste. I salute the divine in you. In India they say what's so true. I salute the divine in you. I salute the divine in you. I salute the divine in you.
Dear friends, we had been hearing very beautiful, very useful thoughts on the message of Swami Vivekananda and how broad his teachings were, and that broadness did not come at the expense of depth. It was deep and broad both. It was not superficial. It touched the heart of everyone. I am not, of course, even attempting to give summary of each of these what these wonderful speakers spoke. Then again I will have to repeat the whole thing, in fact, because. But I was very much touched by this idea that Janet was telling about dialogue and how the study of other religions intensifies also our understanding of our own faith. And she described from her practical experience that how the students, they come, they don't know each other, but how they enter into dialogue. They start communicating, and then they discover that common core, where now they become friends. They start loving each other. And this is a very important idea, that we should converse with each other, understand each other, instead of just looking at each other with eyes of suspicion. And that is the most important thing. I saw my friend Father John Sullivan very nicely elaborating that idea of love, that is the core. God is love. It is, and that when that manifests, God manifests. Wherever we see love manifesting, it is God manifesting. Therefore, there is, of course, a distinction between what is love and what appears like love. It is when the God is manifesting, then it is sign of love. Otherwise, something that appears like love, but then it is not really so. So, it is very important to have this. He also brought out that beautiful idea that religion is seeing God in our own soul. That is very important. And then Professor Jeffrey dwelt on it a lot, about how can we see God. As Vivekananda says, we cannot see God, but yes, we are God. Just as nobody can see oneself. Can we see ourselves? No, nobody has as such. You can hold the mirror, it can reflect the body. Are we the body? No. We can't see ourselves. I read Meister Eckhart's beautiful idea about this. Meister Eckhart said, we cannot see God with these eyes, but we can see God with the eyes with which God sees us. Yes. So that is a great thought, that is the eyes that we have to develop. And also, therefore, Jeffrey touched on this idea very well, that where is the source of all this? The source of these teachings, are they new, radically new, this thing, or something that is already there in the scriptures? Yes, it is already there in the scriptures, but then has to be presented in a new form, where the universal content in it becomes available to people. And that was the great contribution that we see Swami Vivekananda makes to our times. That those very ideas hidden in the caves, hidden in some ancient interpretations, well, those came out. And he sees that actually in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, his great teacher, that these great scriptures of the ancient times, he saw. He mentions at one place that I saw the Upanishads walking, eating, and all that before me. He was referring to Sri Ramakrishna. They are not just books written intellectually spinning ideas, but they are the experiences recorded somehow in very feeble words, because there are no proper words to give those experiences. But those experiences were the records of actual experiences. At one place, when Vivekananda, in Practical Vedanta, his book Practical Vedanta, he asked this question. People ask, is realizing God and all such ideas, are they practical? Are they practical or just poetic ideas? He says, to answer this question, I will say that they were first practicalized, first they were experienced, and then written for our benefit. That's all. Like a person having seen, say, African safari would write a record for others to know about it. So it's like that. It is a record of actual experiences. And why are those records? So that we also can have the same experience. He says in the book Raja Yoga that although many religions, all religions, he says, all religions say that these truths are based on the experiences, somehow some claim is made that it was happened once for all in some ancient times, and now nobody can have that experience. No, even now, and not some monopoly there. Even now, and each of us has that opportunity to open up that great treasure of divinity in us and realize that. And that is what I would see as the understanding and experiencing these ideas presented by the great life of Swami Vivekananda. I thank all the speakers for the wonderful treasure of thought that they have brought to this podium. Janet Cooper Nelson, she is a close associate in a way. Not that I do all these wonderful things she does. I am rather a quiet person here. But she responded to my request and agreed to come here. I am very thankful to her. Father John Sullivan, I could not contact him earlier, and so it was kind of a later call to him. And he said, well, I don't know much, how can, but I said, you can give it a try, because self-confidence is another, great idea of Swami Vivekananda. So have confidence. Why do you say it will be, you can do it? And then, yes, our Pat, she said, okay, I will provide. She also lives in Attleboro, so I will provide material to John. And we always know that he can do all these things. He is very humble, that's all. And thank you, John. This was a beautiful exposition. And Jeffrey Long, I had been longing to get him someday here. But then it came to be true today. Thank you very much for this beautiful presentation. And thank you, John Schlenk. Where is he? Oh, yeah, John. For coming all the way from New York to give this beautiful musical presentation. I had known him for last over 12 years. When I first went to New York Vedanta Society, he was there, and I had the chance to hear him, and I liked a lot. And then we started having some more music composed by him here, wonderful music, and you all, I am sure, loved it, enjoyed it. And also my thanks to Anuradha for giving this great dance. My thanks to all the singers, the accompaniments, and also, of course, the thanks to you all, and also my special thanks to our devotees, friends, mainly associated with India Museum and Heritage Society, who every year for this event provide the dinner. My thanks to them.